The golden towers of the Valari Empire shone under the twin suns of Valara Prime. The air smelled of silver flowers and burning spice crystals. To outsiders, the capital looked like heaven. To humans, it was a maze of rules, pride, and silence. Captain Ethan Cole walked quietly through the palace garden, holding a pot of blue flowers from Earth. Forget-me-nots. He knelt beside a marble fountain, placing them gently into the soil. Behind him, alien guards watched in quiet confusion. Humans really care for such small things, one whispered to the other. They say this one was a soldier, another replied, smirking. He looks more like a gardener. Ethan didn't respond. He heard them clearly, but he never reacted. He simply smiled, wiped his hands, and stood up. His posture was calm, his voice always soft. The Valari called him the Silent One. He was not born into nobility or wealth. He was a soldier from a war long past, chosen by treaty to marry Princess Serenia Valar, daughter of the Empress. The marriage had united two species after years of bloodshed. It was political, cold, and meant only for peace. Serenia had never wanted it. When she first met Ethan, she found him odd, too kind, too patient. The Valari were elegant and graceful, proud of their shining skin and silver eyes. Humans looked rough, imperfect, always wearing their hearts on their sleeves. Yet Ethan had something she couldn't understand. Peace. He walked through the palace without fear, without anger, without any visible ambition. He spoke to workers, to guards, even to the royal cooks. He told small jokes. He fixed broken things in the garden. Once, when Serenia was passing by, she heard him teaching a servant's child how to make a paper bird from human paper. "Why do you waste your time on them?" she asked him. He looked up and smiled, his eyes gentle. "Because kindness spreads faster than orders. Your Highness," his words stayed with her, though she never admitted it. Ethan's quarters were small, just a bed, a shelf of old books, and a single window looking out to the stars. Every night he would sit there, staring at them quietly. Sometimes Serenia would see him from her balcony, that same human sitting motionless, as if talking to ghosts no one else could hear. She once asked him, "Do you miss your home, human?" He had smiled, but there was a hint of sadness. "Home isn't a place, Serenia. It's the people you fight for." Serenia didn't understand. The Valari fought for empire, for order, for glory. Fighting for people, that was emotional, too human. But still, there was something about his eyes, calm on the surface but deep like a storm sleeping beneath water. Life went on peacefully for months. Ethan attended every royal dinner, dressed properly, bowed when needed, spoke only when spoken to. The nobles mocked him behind his back, calling him the pet husband. He never seemed to mind. Once, during a banquet, a Valari general lifted a glass of wine and said loudly, "A toast to the Empress and her daughter, and to her human ornament who sits so quietly he might as well be furniture." The crowd laughed. Ethan smiled softly and raised his glass in return. "To peace," he said simply. The laughter stopped. Something in his voice, steady, calm but edged with steel, made even the general look away. Serenia saw it too. The human was not offended. He was just watching, measuring. That night she couldn't sleep. Why didn't he react? Why did he always forgive? The following morning, Serenia walked into the garden and found Ethan repairing a fallen tree branch. "Why do you let them mock you?" she asked suddenly. Ethan looked at her, surprised but calm. "Because anger doesn't change their minds. Actions do." She crossed her arms. "You could challenge them. You are a soldier, are you not?" He smiled faintly. "Once, long ago, but I promised never to raise my hand again unless I had to." "To whom did you promise?" He paused. For a moment, the peace in his eyes shifted like a shadow crossing sunlight. "To the ghosts of the men I couldn't save," he said quietly. Serenia didn't know what to say. For the first time, she felt small. She had lived her whole life behind palace walls, but this human had carried death, loss, and pain, and still smiled. Maybe he wasn't weak. Maybe he was strong in a way the Valari could never understand. Days turned into weeks. Serenia found herself spending more time with him, watching him teach the servants, listening to his quiet stories about Earth. He told her about rain, about forests, about oceans that roared louder than any Valari storm. He described how humans would stare at the night sky, dreaming of other worlds. "Your people are strange," Serenia said once. "You search for peace, but you build weapons. Ethan chuckled. Because we know peace doesn't last unless you're ready to defend it. His words made her think again and again. Soon, she noticed something else. The guards around her palace quarters had grown comfortable, relaxed. Fights among servants had stopped. The people seemed calmer, all because of that one human's quiet influence, and yet, despite all the peace he brought, Serenia sometimes saw him awake at night, standing under the stars with his hands clenched tightly, his breath heavy like a man fighting invisible chains. One evening, Serenia entered his quarters unannounced. Ethan was sitting at the window again, staring at the twin moons. "You look like you're waiting for something," she said softly. He smiled, though his eyes didn't move from the stars. "Maybe I am. For what?" "For peace to be real," she frowned. "Isn't it real now?" He finally looked at her. "Peace built on fear is not peace. Your empire and my people signed a treaty, but neither side trusts the other. I just hope one day you'll see what humanity really is." She studied him closely. His voice was calm, but the weight behind it was heavy, ancient. "Do you think I don't understand humans?" she asked. Ethan stood up slowly, walking toward her. He was taller than most Valari, his movements deliberate and quiet. He stopped beside her, close enough that she could feel the faint warmth from his body. "No," he said gently, "I think no one does. Not even humans themselves." Then he smiled again, that same gentle smile, and stepped back. "You should rest, Princess. Tomorrow will be busy." She left without replying, but her heart was unsettled. Later that night, as the palace lights dimmed, Serenia stood on her balcony and looked down. Ethan was in the garden again, standing beside the fountain. The forget-me-nots he had planted were glowing faintly under the moonlight. He reached down, touched the flowers gently, and whispered something she barely heard. "I promised I'd never lose control again." The words sent a chill through her. What did he mean? Lose control of what? She watched him for a long time. The calm human who smiled at everyone, who never raised his voice, who spoke softly even when mocked. And yet, for the first time, she wondered if that calmness was not peace but containment. The next morning, Serenia found a sealed letter on her table. It was from the Empress. "My daughter, prepare for travel. Reports have come from the border worlds. The Karn Dominion is moving again. You will attend the peace meeting in my stead. Take your human husband with you. Let the enemy see that we are united." Serenia sighed. Another negotiation. Another show of power. Ethan stood nearby, already packing his small bag. "It's dangerous," he said quietly. She smirked. "You sound worried for me, human." He looked at her with a small smile. "Always." That day they boarded the royal cruiser Valar's Grace, heading toward the outer rim. The sky was filled with glowing ships, the stars sharp against the void. Serenia sat beside him in silence, watching him read an old human book. "Do you think peace will work this time?" she asked finally. Ethan closed the book, eyes distant. "Peace only works when both sides remember what war costs." Serenia turned to look at him. "And you, Ethan Cole, do you remember?" He stared out the window for a long moment. Then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, he said, "Every single day." The silence after that felt heavy, stretching between them like a storm waiting to be born. As the ship entered warp, Serenia looked once more at the human beside her, the man she had thought harmless, gentle, almost fragile. But now, something deep inside her whispered that she had been wrong. Very wrong. Because behind those calm blue eyes, something slept. Something that once woke would never be peaceful again. The royal cruiser, Valar's Grace, drifted through the black sea of stars, its silver hull gleaming softly. Princess Serenia Valar sat by the wide viewing window, staring into the void. The stars felt closer here, bright, endless, and yet cold. Ethan Cole sat a few seats away, reading mission reports on a holoscreen. His face, calm as ever, reflected the faint blue light. Serenia spoke without looking at him. "Why are you always so quiet?" He looked up, smiling softly. "Because silence teaches more than words." "You sound like an old philosopher," she said with a small laugh. "Maybe I am," Ethan replied. "A soldier who's seen too much becomes one." They were heading toward Taraxis, a border world between the Valari Empire and the Karn Dominion. Once peaceful, it had become the center of raids and political tension. Serenya's task was to calm the storm, but the Karn were not known for peace. They were a reptilian race, massive and brutal, with scales like black iron and voices like thunder. They believed strength was the only law. The Volari wanted to talk, the Karn wanted to conquer. And in the middle of it all was a quiet human who smiled too gently for a man who once wore armor. When they arrived, Taraxis looked scarred from orbit. Craters marked the surface and broken cities dotted the land. The royal delegation descended in a sleek shuttle, greeted by frightened Volari civilians and grim-faced soldiers. General Kael Vora, commander of the border forces, bowed to Serenya. "Your Highness, it's an honor, but I must say it's dangerous for you to be here." Serenya lifted her chin proudly. The Empress believes peace must be seen to be trusted. Kael's gaze moved to Ethan. "And this is the human?" Ethan smiled and extended his hand. "Captain Ethan Cole, just here to help." Kael shook his hand carefully, studying him. "You don't look like much of a fighter." Ethan chuckled. "I'm better with flowers these days." The general laughed politely, but his eyes stayed uncertain. That evening, the Volari delegation met the Karn leaders in the ruined city's council hall. The air was tense. The Karn commander, Vorak the Scarred, stood tall, twice Ethan's size, his armor black and lined with red light. "Princess Serenya," Vorak growled. "Your empire's time of weakness shows. You send children and pets to speak with warriors." Serenya's expression stayed calm. "We seek peace, Commander Vorak. The war cost lives on both sides. Must it continue?" Vorak's yellow eyes shifted toward Ethan. "And what is this? A pet human?" The Volari guard stirred angrily, but Ethan raised a hand, his voice calm. "Just a husband, Commander. I prefer to stay out of trouble." The hall filled with dark laughter. "A harmless human," Vorak sneered. "Tell me, did your wife tame you with a leash or a kiss?" Serenya's eyes flashed. "Watch your tongue, Karn." Ethan placed a gentle hand on her arm. "It's fine," he whispered. Then he smiled faintly at Vorak. "I've been called worse." But inside, something old stirred. He could take insults. He could take mockery. But seeing Serenya's anger for his sake, that awoke a small ember deep inside, a reminder of what he once was. The talks went nowhere. The Karn refused every term of peace, demanding Volari surrender of 3 border worlds. Serenya refused, knowing it would mean weakness. The meeting ended in silence. That night, Serenya stood on the balcony of her quarters, watching the burned horizon. Ethan stood beside her, quiet as always. "They will attack," she said softly. "Yes," Ethan replied. "Soon." She turned to him. "You sound sure?" He nodded slowly. "I've seen their kind before. They speak of honor, but they crave domination." She looked at him carefully. "How many wars have you seen, Ethan?" He hesitated before answering. "Too many to count. Enough to know peace doesn't last." Her voice lowered. "And yet you chose to live like this. Calm. Peaceful." He smiled faintly. "Because I know what happens when I don't." Serenya studied his face. She saw no anger there, only quiet sadness. But behind that sadness there was something else. A storm sleeping beneath calm waters. At midnight, alarms echoed through the city. "Incoming fire, incoming fire." The sky lit up as Karn ships descended, firing plasma blasts into the Volari outposts. Explosions shook the ground. Serenya rushed into the corridor as guards ran to their posts. "Report!" she shouted. General Kael's voice crackled through the comms. "We're under attack. Karn forces broke the ceasefire. They're surrounding the capital block." Ethan appeared beside her, already dressed in his old human combat vest. It was worn, black, with a faded Earth symbol on the chest. Serenya looked at him, eyes wide. "Where did you get that?" He gave a small smile. "Never leave old habits too far behind." Before she could reply, an explosion tore through the wall. The shockwave threw them both to the ground. Volari guards fired back, but the Karn soldiers stormed through, massive and brutal. "Protect the princess," shouted Kale. Ethan grabbed Serenya's hand, pulling her behind cover. "Stay down." "Oh." Karn soldier kicked through the debris, roaring, "Capture the royal one alive." Before anyone could react, Ethan moved. He stepped forward with calm precision, grabbed a fallen weapon and fired 3 perfect shots, each one hitting a Karn in the throat. The guards froze. His movements were too fast, too clean, too practiced. Serenya stared at him in shock. "Ethan, you said you don't fight." He glanced at her, eyes steady. "I said I don't start fights." They ran through the burning corridors trying to reach the command center. But the Karn were everywhere. The air filled with smoke and screams. Outside, the city was a battlefield. Karn ships rained fire, and Valari soldiers fought desperately to hold the lines. Serenya's shuttle was destroyed. There was no escape. Vorak's booming voice echoed through the loudspeakers. "Princess Serenya Valar, surrender and I may. Spare your people, resist, and I'll burn every world you rule." Serenya's hands shook with fury. "He lies, he'll kill everyone anyway." Ethan loaded another rifle and looked at her. "Then we make him regret ever landing here." Before they could move, a plasma blast struck the ground beside them. The shock wave sent Serenya flying. She hit the ground hard, vision blurring. Through the haze, she saw Ethan kneeling beside her, shouting something she couldn't hear. Then a Karn soldier struck him from behind. "Take the princess," the soldier growled. "Leave the human." Ethan tried to rise, but another blow hit his head. His world went black. When Serenya opened her eyes, she was bound inside a metal tent. Karn guards stood around her. Vorak paced before her with a cruel grin. "Your empire is finished, little princess," he said. "Tomorrow I will send your message of surrender to your mother." Serenya spat at him. "You'll pay for this." He laughed darkly. "Perhaps, but first I'll show your people what becomes of their royal line." He turned to the guards. "Find the human. Bring me his head." The guards nodded and left. Serenya's heart sank. She had never prayed to any god before, but in that moment she wished, no begged, for Ethan to live. Far away, in the ruins of the city, Ethan woke up amid smoke and ash. His body ached, blood trickling down his forehead. Around him, Valari soldiers lay dead or dying. He could hear the distant roar of Karn engines, the laughter of their warriors, and something inside him snapped. He looked down at his shaking hands, at the broken rifle beside him. Memories flooded. In Earth's burning cities, fallen comrades, the screams of war. He had promised never to lose control again, never to let the rage wake. But now, Serenya was gone. He stood slowly. His breathing changed, slow, deep, controlled. His blue eyes turned cold as winter steel. "All right," he whispered. "No more peace." He moved like a shadow through the ruins, silent, deadly. He took weapons from fallen soldiers, rifles, blades, grenades. He repaired his damaged armor, his old human instincts coming alive with terrifying precision. The Karn patrols never saw him coming. One by one they fell, throats slit, weapons stolen, bodies left in the dark. Ethan Cole had been a gardener, a husband, a man of peace. Now he was something else, something the galaxy had hoped to forget. As dawn broke over Taraxis, the Karn camp was quiet. Too quiet. A guard turned, hearing a faint sound. Then a knife hit his throat. Another heard footsteps, too light to be Karn, too sure to be Valari. And then the sky exploded in fire. Grenades detonated, smoke filled the air, and from the chaos stepped a single figure in black armor, eyes burning cold blue. Vorak turned toward the sound, growling, "What is that?" One of his soldiers shouted, terrified. "It's the human!" Ethan's voice cut through the smoke, calm and deadly. "You took my wife!" Vorak's face twisted in rage. "Kill him!" Dozens of Karn rushed forward. Plasma fire lit the air. Ethan moved like a machine, rolling, shooting, stabbing, never stopping. Every strike was precise, every motion efficient. The soldiers who mocked him now screamed in terror. Serenya, still bound, heard the battle outside, the roars, the gunfire, and then silence. A shadow appeared in her tent's entrance, lit by firelight. He was covered in blood and smoke, armor cracked, eyes burning like stars. "Ethan," she whispered. He cut her chains and lifted her gently. "You're safe now." She looked at him, trembling. "What did you do?" He didn't answer. Outside, the camp was silent. Every Karn soldier lay dead. The smell of smoke hung heavy in the morning air. The camp of the Karn Dominion, once filled with laughter, fire, and weapons, was now silent. Only the wind moved, carrying the faint crackle of burning metal. Ethan Cole stood in the center of the destruction. His armor was dented, half-broken, and black with ash. His face was calm, but his eyes were not. They were cold, sharp, glowing faintly blue under the smoke. Serenia Valar stood beside him, still trembling. She had seen wars before, brief skirmishes, border conflicts, but never anything like this. She whispered, almost afraid to speak. "Ethan, how did you do this?" He didn't look at her. "Training," he said quietly, "and a promise I hoped I'd never break." She looked around. The bodies, the torn flags, the burning ships. There were dozens, maybe hundreds of Karn soldiers. All dead, all killed by one man. This was not the peaceful gardener she married. Not the calm, smiling human who tended flowers. This was something else. Something terrible. They walked through the ruins together. The rising sun painted the battlefield in red light. Serenia felt her heart race with every step. "Ethan," she said softly, "what are you really?" He stopped walking, silent for a moment. Then he said, "Once, a long time ago, I was part of something called Project Revenant." She frowned. "What is that?" "A human military experiment," he said. "We were trained to keep fighting no matter what, through pain, through fear, through death itself. We learned how to shut off emotions when the rage took over." He turned to face her, eyes distant. "I was one of the few who survived the program. Most didn't." Serenia felt a chill. "You were made into a weapon." Ethan gave a small, broken smile. "No, I became one." They reached a small outpost where a few surviving Valari soldiers were hiding. When they saw Ethan, they froze. "By the stars," one whispered. "He did this alone?" Another dropped his weapon, backing away. "He's not human. He's a demon." Ethan ignored them. He found a comm terminal and started sending a coded signal. "What are you doing?" Serenia asked. "Calling for help," he said. "The Karn fleet will come soon. We need to move before they find us." He spoke like a soldier again. Short, firm, certain. No hesitation. Serenia realized he had changed completely. The man she knew was gone, replaced by someone who moved like a machine but spoke like a man trying to stay human. Hours later, they reached the ruins of the city where the Velari forces had once held their base. Now it was a graveyard. Buildings collapsed. Ships burned. The smell of death filled the air. Ethan scanned the area, eyes alert. "They'll be back," he said. "They never leave a survivor." Serenia touched his arm gently. "You saved me." "You could have run, but you didn't. Why?" He looked at her quietly. "Because I made a vow. When I married you, I promised to protect you, no matter what I had to become." Her voice trembled. "And what are you now?" He looked at his hands, covered in black soot. A reminder of what humans truly are. That night, while they rested in a broken shelter, Serenia watched him from a distance. He was sitting near the fire, cleaning his weapons in silence. For the first time, she noticed his scars, long, deep, old ones that crossed his arms and back. Each one told a story of war, of battles fought long before he came to Valara Prime. "Ethan," she said softly, "you never told me about your past." He didn't look up. "Because I wanted to forget it." "Then why remember now?" He stopped cleaning the rifle and looked at her. "Because forgetting doesn't make it go away. It just waits for the right moment to wake up again." His voice was low, almost a whisper. "And it's awake now." Serenia stared at him, realizing that the calm, gentle husband she once pitied was actually something the galaxy had feared for centuries. The next morning, the sky turned dark. Karn warships began to appear in orbit. Their thunderous engines shook the ground. Ethan activated the comm device again. "Valari Command, this is Captain Ethan Cole. The princess is alive." "Repeat, she's alive." "But Karn reinforcements are inbound." Static filled the channel. Then a voice responded, "Captain Cole, this is High Command. Reinforcements are en route, but it'll take hours. Hold your position." He shut the comm off and looked at Serenia. "We have to hold until then," she nodded. "What do you need me to do?" "Stay close," he said. "And don't look away." As the Karn ships descended, Ethan began setting traps. Mines, tripwires, EMP grenades, even makeshift explosives built from wreckage. His movements were fast, exact, almost mechanical. Serenia followed him, trying to help, but she couldn't keep up. "You move like you've done this 1,000 times, she said. He smiled faintly. "I have." When the first Karn patrol landed, Ethan was already waiting. He hid among the shadows, let them pass, and struck silently. One knife, one shot, one kill at a time. Serenia watched, horrified and amazed. Each motion was perfect. Every attack was clean. He didn't fight like a man. He fought like a storm. The Karn shouted in confusion, firing wildly. But they couldn't hit what they couldn't see. One soldier screamed, "Where is he?" From behind, a quiet voice answered, "Right here." Then the sound of a gunshot echoed through the ruins. The battle raged for hours. Karn after Karn fell. Ethan moved through fire and smoke like he belonged to it. Serenia tried to keep her courage. She used a plasma pistol covering his flank. Once, a Karn soldier aimed at her from the side, and Ethan threw himself in front of the blast. His armor cracked, but he didn't stop. He tackled the enemy, broke its neck, and kept moving. "Ethan!" Serenia shouted. "You're hurt." He turned his head slightly. "I've been worse." He said it like he was talking about a small cut, not a hole in his armor. After the last Karn fell, silence returned. Smoke drifted through the air. Serenia ran to him. His armor was scorched, his hands shaking slightly. But his expression stayed calm. She put a hand on his chest. "You're bleeding." He looked down. "It'll stop," she frowned. "You can't just keep fighting like this." He looked at her, and for a moment his calm mask cracked. "If I stop, you die. If you die, peace dies. I can't let that happen." Serenia felt something heavy in her chest. "You can't save everyone, Ethan." He gave a sad smile. "I know, but I can save you." Hours later, Valari dropships finally arrived. Soldiers poured out, shocked by the sight. The camp was destroyed, and hundreds of Karn bodies lay scattered. When the commander saw Ethan, he froze. "You did this alone?" Ethan only said, "They left me no choice." The soldiers didn't speak again. Some looked at him with awe, others with fear. Serenia stepped forward. "He saved me. He saved all of us," but the commander's face was pale. "Princess, if this is what one human can do alone, imagine what their armies could do if angered." Serenia glanced at Ethan, who stood quietly looking at the horizon. She understood then why the galaxy feared humans. It wasn't their technology or numbers, it was their spirit. Their refusal to die, their ability to become monsters when pushed too far. On the flight back to Valara Prime, Ethan sat by the window, silent. Serenia sat beside him, trying to find the right words. Finally, she said, "I was wrong about you." He turned, one eyebrow raised. "How so?" "I thought you were harmless." He smiled faintly. "I wanted you to think that. Why?" "Because I'm tired of being a weapon. I wanted to be human again. I thought maybe here, among your people, I could forget." Serenia looked at him, her voice soft. "And now?" He looked out the window again. "Now I remember everything." When they arrived at the capital, the Empress herself waited in the docking bay. The crowd cheered as the princess stepped off the ship alive. But when they saw Ethan, whispers filled the hall. "That's him. The human who slaughtered the Karn. Monster, or hero." The Empress looked at him with cold eyes. "Captain Cole, what did you do on Taraxis?" Ethan met her gaze steadily. "I saved your daughter. And destroyed an army," she said. "Do you know what that means for us? The Karn will call for revenge. You have started another war." Serenia stepped forward. "Mother, he saved us all." The Empress ignored her. "And what happens when this rage of yours turns against us, human? What happens when you decide we are the enemy?" Ethan didn't answer. He only bowed his head slightly. "Then you'd better hope you never give me a reason." The hall fell silent. That night, Ethan stood on the palace balcony looking at the stars. Serenia approached him quietly. "You're not sleeping again," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "War doesn't let you sleep." She stood beside him. "You're not a monster, Ethan. You saved me." He looked at her gently. "Maybe, but every time I fight, I lose a little more of who I am." She took his hand. "Then I'll help you remember." For a long time they stood there in silence. Two souls, one alien, one human, both scarred by war, both trying to find peace again. But deep inside Ethan's mind, something stirred still. A whisper that never truly went away. Once you wake the rage, it never sleeps for long. The Royal Council chamber of GalacticPrime was filled with tension. High lords, generals, and nobles sat around the long oval table, their jeweled armor gleaming under the soft blue lights. At the far end stood Empress Valithra, her silver crown shining, her expression cold and sharp. Everyone whispered the same name, Ethan Cole. Half a battalion wiped out. One noble muttered. An entire Karn base destroyed by a single human. Impossible, another hissed. No creature can do that alone. The Empress raised her hand. The room fell silent. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were filled with calculation. Ethan Cole, she said slowly, is not just a man. He is a reminder. Of what, Your Majesty? Asked Admiral Kraos, a tall alien with pale, scaly skin. She looked toward the large holo display showing battle footage, smoke, fire, and one human standing in the middle of it all. Of why the Terrans were feared, and why we exiled them from the Galactic Alliance long ago. In a quiet room nearby, Princess Serenia listened from behind a half-open door. Her hands trembled. She could hear the Lord speaking about her husband as if he were a weapon. Not a person, humans, one whispered, should never have been allowed near our royalty. Perhaps the princess should annul the union, another said. Before his rage burns our empire next. Serenia's eyes filled with anger. She stepped into the chamber. Enough! The room froze. Even the Empress turned in surprise. My husband is not a monster, Serenia said firmly. He saved my life and yours too. Without him, the Karn would have conquered half the border worlds. The nobles exchanged uneasy glances. The Empress, however, only looked thoughtful. You speak with emotion, my daughter, she said slowly. But leadership requires caution. Caution? Serenia shot back. Or fear. A low murmur rippled through the hall. The Empress sighed. Leave us, counselors. I will speak with my daughter alone. The nobles obeyed, though many left with cold looks. When the chamber was empty, silence filled the air between mother and daughter. Serenia, the Empress said quietly, you know I do not hate your human, but I cannot ignore what he represents. He represents courage, Serenia said. He represents chaos, her mother replied. Do you know how many empires have fallen because of human wars? How many worlds burned because of their fury? Serenia met her gaze. Then maybe that fury is what we need to protect us now. The Empress looked away. And what happens when that fury turns on you? Before Serenia could answer, a palace guard entered bowing deeply. Your Majesty, reports from the outer sectors. Karn fleets are moving. Thousands of ships. It looks like a full invasion. The Empress's face darkened. So the storm begins. Far across the city in the quiet gardens behind the palace, Ethan Cole stood alone. He had removed his armor, wearing only a simple dark shirt and trousers. His arms still carried scars that glowed faintly under the alien moonlight. He could feel eyes on him, guards watching from the shadows. He didn't blame them. He had become something they couldn't understand. Footsteps approached. Serenia appeared, her face pale but determined. They're afraid of you, she said softly. Ethan smiled sadly. Can't blame them. I'd be afraid too. You shouldn't joke about that, he turned toward her. You think I'm joking? For a long moment, silence hung between them. Then Serenia said, The Karn are coming. My mother says it's war. Ethan's eyes hardened. Then we fight. She touched his hand. But they see you as the weapon. They'll use you, Ethan. He looked down. They already have. Later that night, a meeting was held in the war room. Holomaps glowed over the large round table, showing red dots moving toward Valari space. The Karn Armada will arrive in 72 hours, said Admiral Kraos. Their fleet is 3 times our size. Ethan leaned against the wall, silent. The Empress glanced at him. Captain Cole, if you have ideas, now is the time. He looked up slowly. You won't like them. Try me. He walked forward, his eyes fixed on the hologram. They expect you to fight like before, slow, defensive, predictable. That's why they'll win. You need to strike first. Impossible, Kraos barked. We can't attack a fleet that size, Ethan ignored him. I can infiltrate their command ship, cut their communications, cripple their leadership. Without orders, their fleet will fall into chaos. The Empress frowned. You're suggesting a suicide mission? Ethan smiled faintly. Only if I fail. Serenia stepped forward quickly. No, you can't go alone. He looked at her gently. You know I have to. She clenched her fists. You've already given enough, Ethan. You've bled enough. He stepped closer and touched her cheek softly. And I'll bleed again if it means you live. The Empress turned away, hiding a flicker of emotion. So be it. The human wants war, give him his war. 2 days later, the Karn Armada entered Velari space. Their ships blotted out the stars, thousands of dark vessels moving like a living storm. In the command room, alarms screamed. The Velari fleet scrambled to form defensive lines. Ethan stood in his armor once again, the same one now repaired and marked with new symbols. Velari runes painted by Serenia herself. Don't die, she whispered before he boarded the dropship. He smiled. I'll try my best not to. As the dropship launched into the void, Serenia watched it disappear into the stars. A part of her feared she would never see him again. Inside the Karn flagship, the atmosphere was tense. Their leader, Overlord Grath, a massive creature with metallic scales, watched the stars from his throne. The humans are weak, he growled. Their rage makes them unstable. A soldier entered. Overlord, our sensors detect a small ship approaching. It carries no identification. Grath's eyes narrowed. Destroy it. But before the order could be carried out, alarms began to sound. Boarding detected. Deck 7 breached. The Overlord rose from his throne. Who dares? And then the lights flickered. One by one, the cameras went dark. In the darkness, a low voice whispered through their comms. You wanted the human. You've got him. Inside the corridors, Ethan moved like a shadow. Every step was calculated. Every motion silent. He cut through guards with surgical precision, disabling weapons and cutting power lines. The ship trembled under explosions. The Karn soldiers shouted in panic, "What is happening?" Something's on board. It's just one man. But that one man was enough. Ethan reached the command core, his armor smoking, his eyes glowing faintly. He placed a small device on the console. This is for Valara, he whispered. He pressed the switch. The ship's energy grid overloaded. Sparks and fire exploded across the decks. Outside, the entire Karn flagship went dark, then erupted in a massive explosion visible across the system. On the Velari command ship, the Empress stared at the screen in disbelief. The flagship, it's gone. Serenia pressed her hands against the glass, tears in her eyes. Ethan? Admiral Creo shouted. Their fleet is in disarray. Command signals lost. They're retreating. Velari ships surged forward, blasting through the disorganized Karn lines. Within hours, the once unstoppable armada began to crumble. When the last Karn vessel jumped out of the system, cheers erupted across the fleet. Valara was safe for now, but Serenia didn't smile. She looked out into the stars, whispering, "Come back to me." Hours later, a small escape pod was found drifting among the debris. When they opened it, Ethan was inside, unconscious, burned, but alive. Serenia ran into the med bay as they carried him in. She grabbed his hand tightly. Ethan, wake up!" His eyes fluttered open. "Hey, princess," he murmured weakly. "Told you I'd try not to die." She laughed and cried at the same time, pressing her forehead against his. "You stupid, brave human," he smiled faintly. "That's kind of what we do." Days later, the Empire celebrated its victory. The Empress addressed the people, her voice echoing through the Grand Hall. Valara stands because of courage, because of unity, and because of one man who showed us that humanity's fire is not a curse but a gift. The hall erupted in applause. But when the Empress turned to look at Ethan, now standing beside Serenia, arm in a sling, there was still something unreadable in her gaze. She approached him quietly. "You saved us, and you terrify me." Ethan gave a small smile. "That's usually how it goes." The Empress studied him for a long moment, then finally extended her hand. "Then let us hope that fire always burns for us, not against us," he took her hand. "That depends on how you treat the people I care about." Serenia smiled proudly, standing between them. That night, as the fireworks lit the skies of Valara Prime, Ethan and Serenia sat together on the palace balcony. "Do you think they'll ever stop fearing you?" she asked softly. He looked at the stars. "Maybe. Or maybe fear is what keeps them safe." She rested her head on his shoulder. "You're not just my husband anymore. You're their legend now," he chuckled. Legends are overrated. I just want peace, she smiled. Then maybe one day we'll find it together. But far beyond Valara's peaceful night in the dark of space, fragments of the destroyed Karn flagship floated silently. The galaxy was silent, but it was a quiet that did not last. News of Ethan Cole, the human who destroyed the Karn flagship and saved Valara Prime, spread faster than any fleet could fly. Every civilization whispered the name, sometimes in awe, sometimes in fear. Did you see what one human did? A Valari soldier asked. One man, alone, entire armies gone. Impossible, a merchant said. No one could survive that. But the videos, the holo recordings, the testimony of survivors, they all told the same story. Humans were underestimated. They were calm, peaceful, and deadly. Ethan, meanwhile, did not celebrate. He walked the palace gardens with Serenia, sunlight glinting off the twin moons in the distance. You've become a legend, she said quietly, and people are terrified of you. He smiled faintly, looking at the blue forget-me-nots he had planted months ago. I don't want to be a legend. I just want to protect the people I care about. Serenia touched his arm. You've already done more than that. You saved your wife and an empire. He looked at her. And how many more will need saving before they leave me alone? Across the galaxy, the remnants of the Karn Dominion regrouped. The survivors had fled in scattered fleets, but their leader, Overlord Grath, was alive. He paced across the bridge of a repaired warship, his claws gripping the railing tightly. His eyes burned with fury. That human, he cannot exist, he hissed. One of us fell to him, and we are the strongest in the galaxy. A Karn officer bowed. Overlord, the humans are not yet united. One alone cannot threaten us if we strike with precision. Grath slammed his claw into the console. Do you understand nothing? He is not just one. He is all of them. One human awakens and he carries the fury of an entire species. I will not forget this. The Karn began planning their revenge, vowing to take back the galaxy one system at a time. Back on Valara Prime, the Empress summoned Ethan to the council chamber. The nobles whispered, but no one dared challenge him directly. You saved us, the Empress began, and you showed the galaxy that one human can change the tide of war. Ethan bowed his head. I only did what was necessary. Necessary? She repeated. You slaughtered hundreds, perhaps thousands. The Karn will not forget. He met her gaze evenly. Nor will I. If they attack again, I will do it again. And again. For your people. For Serenia, the council gasped. The Empress remained silent, studying him. Finally she said, perhaps that is what our empire needs. Someone willing to fight when others cannot. Serenia stepped forward. He is more than a weapon. He is human. And humanity has heart. The Empress nodded slowly, though the concern never left her eyes. Weeks passed. Ethan trained Valari soldiers, teaching them human tactics, movement, and unpredictability. He drilled the guards day and night, pushing them harder than any Valari general ever had. It is not enough to survive, he said. You must think like the enemy, strike like the enemy fears, and never hesitate when a life depends on it. The soldiers grumbled, tired and sweating. But by the end of each day, they were stronger, faster, sharper. Serenia watched him from the balcony, admiring the man who had once seemed so harmless. You're changing everything, she said softly. Ethan looked at her, calm but serious. I didn't want to change anything. I only wanted to keep you safe, but peace, even for a day, never lasted in the galaxy. One morning, Valari sensors detected a massive fleet approaching, Karn warships numbering in the thousands. Overlord Grath, Admiral Kryos muttered. He's coming himself. Ethan leaned over the console, tracing the incoming ships. We cannot wait for them to attack. We strike first, or the fleet will crush us. The Empress's eyes met his. And you will lead this strike, he nodded. I'll do it, but I need you, Serenia, to help the people survive while I handle the rest. She took his hand. Then I will be with you. Ethan squeezed her hand tightly. Stay alive, no matter what. The battle began at the edge of Valari space. Ships clashed like thunder across the void. The Karn fired relentlessly, but Ethan's strategies were precise, unpredictable, and devastating. He led a small strike team directly to the flagship, disabling weapons and communications with surgical precision. Every move was efficient, almost inhuman, yet perfectly human in its calculation and instinct. The Karn tried to adapt, but every plan Ethan anticipated. Every attack countered. Within hours, the mighty fleet was in chaos. Ships collided, fired on each other, and exploded. Inside the flagship, Ethan faced Overlord Grath. The massive creature roared, swinging claws that could tear a ship apart. "You will die, human," Grath bellowed. Ethan ducked, rolled, and struck with a small blade. A human weapon, simple but precise. "You should have left me alone." The fight was brutal. Grath was strong, relentless, but Ethan was faster, smarter, and fueled by a calm fury that came from deep within him. Every move he made was controlled, calculated, and deadly. Finally, Ethan drove his blade into the control center of Grath's armor, short-circuiting the energy core. Grath screamed as sparks flew and systems failed. The flagship erupted in fire, leaving Ethan barely enough time to escape. Outside, the remaining Karn fleet had no leadership. Ships scattered, disorganized, and vulnerable. Valari forces pressed forward, blasting their enemies out of space. When the last Karn ship jumped away, silence returned to the battlefield. Only the wreckage remained, floating in the void. Valari commanders looked at Ethan in awe. He did it, alone. Ethan's armor was scorched, his body bruised and bleeding. He looked exhausted. But when he saw Serenia, standing on the bridge of the command ship, her eyes filled with pride and love, he smiled faintly. "I'm back," he said. On Valara Prime, the Empress addressed the people once again. "Today, Valara has survived because of courage, intelligence, and the unbreakable spirit of humanity," she said, her voice echoing across the capital. "We honor Captain Ethan Cole, a man who has reminded us all that one life, when determined, can protect millions." The crowd cheered. Some were fearful, others amazed. But all respected the human who had become more than a soldier. He was now a symbol. Serenia stood beside him, holding his hand. "You're not just my husband," she said softly. "You're a force the galaxy will never forget." Ethan shook his head slightly, smiling. "I don't want to be remembered as a force. I just want to protect the ones I care about." Her eyes glistened. "Then the galaxy is lucky to have you." Weeks later, Valara Prime rebuilt its defenses, trained its armies, and reinforced alliances. The galaxy whispered about the human who could fight like a storm, strike like a shadow, and survive anything. Ethan continued to train soldiers, lead missions, and protect the Empire. But at night, he sat with Serenia in the palace gardens, tending the blue forget-me-nots from Earth. "You're calm again," she said one evening. He looked at her, his eyes soft. "For now, but if the galaxy needs me, the rage will wake again." She laughed softly. "Then I'll stand beside you, not as a princess, but as your partner." He smiled faintly, taking her hand. "I couldn't ask for more." And so the galaxy learned a lesson it would never forget. Humans were not to be underestimated. They were not weak, fragile, or harmless. They could smile, laugh, and care. But when provoked, when their loved ones were threatened, when their rage awakened, they became a force the stars themselves feared. And Ethan Cole, the calm gardener, the quiet husband, the warrior with the heart of a human, had become the living proof. The Karn Dominion would rebuild. Other enemies would rise. Wars would continue. But one truth had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Never underestimate a human, for behind the softest smile could lie a storm capable of shaking empires.